Welcome to another episode of TNT Unpacked. We are your hosts, Justin Collymore and Rochelle Amore.
Hey.
Today we have our first returning guest, Ruben Smith, and today we're talking about the Brexit.
And to find out more about what it is and how and if it will affect us in the Caribbean, Ruben was with us on our Venezuela crisis episode, which I'm sure you guys remember. And he was extremely on the ball when it comes to macroeconomics and explaining in simple terms what is happening. So welcome back, Ruben.
Thank you very much for having me, and hello to all your listeners.
A lot of us woke up on Friday and saw that England had voted to leave the EU, and I think a lot of us were very shocked. The night before, Rochelle was saying, yeah, no way that's going to happen, but then on Friday it happened.
Can you tell us a little bit about the movement in the first place for Britain to leave the EU? Why is that even a thing?
You need to understand that this is all about negotiating trades agreements and what suits best for a country with regards to how they handle their balance of payments and all the other elements related to their economy. Now, what has happened is that although a lot of people would have thought that Britain would not leave the European Union, the vote said the contrary. Now, what kind of impact would that have to this part of the world? Well, it's a sit and wait situation, because the fact is that, yes, they voted to leave the European Union, but under what conditions? Are they going to renegotiate all their trade agreements? Are they going to remain in the single European Union tariff? So what is really the key here is whether they're going to single out themselves totally from the European Union, or are they just going to remain on the European Union single tariff agreement and keep all the trade agreements, or whether they're going to just go at it on their own. And this is where the big question, and no one has been able to answer that question yet.
So if they leave the EU, then they might now trade as the UK rather than under the EU, like you said, that single tariff.
The European Union has been a process that has taken probably anywhere between 40 to 45 years. And in that process, the countries that originally thought about coming together as a single market economy had to negotiate what sort of price on imports coming from each other were going to be, what price of imports were they going to pay for imports coming from parts like Latin America, the Caribbean, and the US and the Far East. That in itself took a very long time to put together. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. The first step towards the European Union came in 1992.
I was
Do not remember
4
that.
years old at the
Well,
time.
that was the first step when the European Union became the European Union. And then I believe it was in somewhere in the late 90s when all the countries agreed to use the euro as a single currency.
Okay.
As you can see, this has been a very tedious process. It's something that did not happen overnight.
Yeah.
Then you have the issues of allowing the different nationalities among Europe to move freely and apply for jobs in the different countries, because now it was a single passport that you have. There was no difference between a French or a German or an Italian or a Spaniard applying for a job, say, in England.
When it came down to the vote, that was one of the reasons a lot of people said they voted leave for, because of the impact of having that free movement through Europe. Basically, immigration was an issue and they didn't want migrants coming to take their jobs.
Yes, but you have to look at the greater picture. And if you read the interview MSNBC did to Alan Greenspan, you realize that immigration was not really the issue. What has been happening in all of Europe and the United States is that productivity is dropping. And when productivity drops, you have an issue in the long run. The whole issue of immigration, you can look at it as a cover-up. But the reality is that all of Europe is undergoing a process where growth is taking a very slow pace, and they just don't have the formulas to cope with this matter.
I think it's an interesting point because a lot of what we have been seeing online seems to suggest that a lot of people our age especially seem to think that this was a terrible idea. And I think we don't really understand the deeper picture and understand both sides of the argument. Because to me, if it's so obviously not the right choice, then why would people vote that way?
Again, you need to look at the all the elements that would affect the whole situation. People are just looking on top of the surface, the tip of the iceberg, but it's going to get worse. This is not going to be a solution. We are now seeing that a lot of countries are going to have, they're going to be holding referendums to leave the European Union. We could be looking at a fragmentation of the whole European Union in the very near future.
Should we just pause for a minute to ask what a referendum is? We touched on it in the Venezuela episode, but just a quick recap because I don't think people understood the power, the political power that this now holds.
You have two types of processes. One is a plebiscite and the other one is a referendum. In the referendum, you would pose a single question where you would be able to answer on a yes or no basis.
Can that be opposed? Can it be redone? Like, if people change their minds? Because a lot of people on Facebook and social media said, yes, I voted leave, but now that I woke up this morning and I'm seeing it actually happening, I'm kind of rethinking my decision. Do you know anything about the legal process?
Once you vote yes or no, that it counts, and there is nothing as such as having another referendum to modify your decision. Your decision is final.
Oh boy.
That is why it's critical that people understand the reasons why they would want to give a positive or a negative response.
If the EU can't make it and keep themselves together, what hope is there for CARICOM?
Gee, that's a very good question. Because then again, is CARICOM really a single market economy as such?
We've been throwing around the word Caribbean single market economy for years.
We don't even allow foreign nationals from CARICOM countries to transit freely among CARICOM nations. So are we really a single market economy? Or
We've already failed on that.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the same situation that's happening in the EU, people always complain when it comes to CARICOM, it's mostly Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica carrying the smaller islands, which is how, in the case of Greece's economy collapsing, Britain might have felt like, why am I cleaning up this mess and funding this recovery when it wasn't my fault and my people are suffering for it? I'm out. Do you think that that's something that we should consider?
Well, in the case of Britain and other European nations, you need to look at their levels of debt to GDP. One of the problems is, are those levels of debt to GDP sustainable? And this is what I believe Britain is really considering. Having another Greece come into play, what sort of resources will that take from the European Central Bank to bail that other country out? Because it took a lot of money to bail Greece out.
I think it was the biggest funding venture in the history of Europe.
Exactly. When you look at the, as I mentioned before, when you look at the levels of debt to GDP that most of the European nations are submerged in, it kind of makes it extremely hard to spend their way out of the situation that they're in. So, when you factor that in and you have levels of productivity dropping, doesn't really leave you much room to play around with whatever monies that you will be able to generate from trade and taxes. This is a key issue that a lot of European nations are looking at right now.
It's basic math, right? You're spending more than you're making.
Exactly.
By far.
So, looking at some of the current packages and agreements that the Caribbean has with the EU, for example, the Dominican Prime Minister expressed some concern about the developmental support provided by them. What are your thoughts on the future of these agreements?
Well, remember you have countries like Germany, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, even Spain and France, that will definitely pick up the slack.
Right.
Their input in this part of the world, you can't really consider it as a bank break.
Citizens of Trinidad and business owners down here, do we have that much to worry about right now?
Not really.
No, we're all safe.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, right? We don't know safe yet. We have to
we-
see how the divorce proceedings go from the EU and Britain. And
Yeah,
that comes
but
out
like
to
I
that.
said, the whole issue is whether Britain is going to cut ties entirely, which I doubt very much they will, with the European Union and the trade agreements that they have already signed and that they have worked on for so many years. It's not something that someone is going to walk away from after putting in all that effort.
We did come across an article on Antillean media that spoke about this issue, and one of the concerns it discussed was the UK has been kind of the English speaking Caribbean's gateway to trade with the European Union because we're part of the Commonwealth Caribbean. Now that Britain has left the EU, the rest of the EU will go forward with new trade agreements treating us as just Latin America and the Caribbean and not giving us any separate identity when it comes to trade agreements as the Commonwealth Caribbean or the English-speaking Caribbean. Do you have any comments on that?
The agreements were signed with the European Union, not Britain exclusively. It was a European Union agreement. So those agreements will still stand. What would need to happen is that now Caribbean nations should move forward towards doing their own trade agreements rather than relying on the influence that Britain had in the European
Right,
Union
right.
to help push their trade agreements. Now, that will take a lot of skill, and this is where the Caribbean nations need to start looking at.
I know the kind of forum that CARICOM and the Dominican Republic has, the EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement, that dialogue, that is going to have to now change.
It wouldn't change. Remember, you have what we call the macro regional trade agreements and you have regional trade agreements. So
Okay.
when you deal with the European Union, you're dealing with a kind of a macro trade agreement. When you're dealing with this, the Caribbean nations, you're really doing a regional trade agreement.
Okay.
Which is what Professor Hussein spoke to a couple of days ago when he said, well, this is an opportunity because now it allows Trinidad and Tobago to access Mercosur, which is one of the largest trade agreements in this part of the world. Yes, Venezuela is part of Mercosur, but that doesn't mean that because you're trading with one of the partners, you're going to have a trade agreement with Mercosur. No, it
Right.
doesn't work that way.
Right.
What needs to happen is that Trinidad and Tobago will have to sit down and discuss terms of a regional trade agreement between Mercosur and Trinidad and Tobago. If not, it could be a CARICOM Mercosur trade agreement.
Can you just clarify this Mercosur business? This opportunity then to kind of renegotiate kind of opens up doors to new partnerships, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
You see, Mercosur is composed of Brazil, Venezuela, Uruguay, and I believe and Argentina. I'm not sure whether Paraguay is also part of Mercosur.
Hold up. So we don't trade with these people already?
Not as a bloc.
They're right next door.
Rochelle's been having a hard day.
I'm sorry, it's just bizarre. I know that we don't have enough interregional trade, but that's ridiculous.
Well, it all comes down to the policies that are instituted by the local administration. We have concentrated too much on trying to push our oil and gas industry. And by doing this, we somehow, some way have created an artificial economy. Why do I speak about an artificial economy? Because if you look at the GDP per capita on the purchasing power parity scheme, you would see that Trinidad and Tobago has something like, I believe it's 26,000 US dollars per person, which means that $1 US that we spend locally is really worth about 2.6 US dollars overseas. And if you notice, whenever you go to the United States, whatever money you take with you usually buys you more clothes and gets you more things that you can actually buy locally.
You know you go to shop in Miami if you can afford
That's
it,
true.
which I can't, but I know some people do that.
That is a distortion of the economy. Why? Because the term purchasing power parity, what it tells you is that what you would pay, say, in the United States for a pair of Levi blue jeans should be comparably the same after you pay duties and you pay the transportation of those jeans. That is not the case.
No.
When you go to an outlet,
Certain places in certain malls.
Yes, exactly.
I would say this: wherever you can purchase a pair of Levi's, you usually end up paying close to $100 for one pair of blue jeans. Whereas in the United States, that same blue jean, if you went to a mall and you bought it right off the rack, you'll probably pay about 60 US.
There are some stores that price things in such a way that I could probably fly to Miami, stay in a hotel for a night, go and buy it, come back to Trinidad, and still pay less than I pay for it in that freaking store. And it really upsets me. And
But,
now I understand why.
But if any of those stores want to sponsor us, then that's cool.
Yeah. We'll take it back.
Yeah, but and then you also have the speculative element within our trading industry. People do not seek profits; they are profiteers. Try to maximize as much as they can make on an item.
They advantage us. Is what you're trying to
They take advantage of the consumer.
And that comes back again to policy. Yeah?
I'll give you an example. I've been in the renewable energy industry for the last 6 years. And I still cannot understand if there are no solar panel manufacturing facilities in the Caribbean. How is it that you have a tariff of 20% for solar panels? That is the duty on solar panels. So if you wanted to import solar panels, you would have to pay 20% plus 15%.
Oh.
Is
No
to
wonder there's no
protect-
solar panels in this country.
The whole duty of setting a tariff system in customs is to protect
Local.
the local industry.
Oh, okay.
But if you don't have a local
Who are
industry,
they
why
protecting?
would you want to charge 20%?
And that's something that Trinidad and Tobago should pay attention to.
Just to reel us back in.
We do tend to
the-
travel far with
We
Ruben.
really do. To the Brexit situation.
Right.
The Caribbean community in the UK, are they likely to be affected by this? For example, changes in immigration and labor laws.
That's if the changes in labor laws take place. We don't know that for a fact, and that is a big question. Again, Britain exiting, and what are they going to do? They have not given any details as to what are going to be the next steps or what are the policies that they're going to be undertaken after they have exited the European Union. So these are the things that people would need to monitor. I don't know if you noticed that most of the markets took a severe drop
Yeah.
and then they bounced back.
I know the pound plummeted to like the lowest it's been in 30 years. People were like, buy your pounds now.
No, and then the market bounced back again.
When I look at this, do you think that what happened with this referendum sort of highlights one of the challenges of democracy in that so many people went out and voted, and it seems as if not everyone understands the wider implications and the deeper impact of that choice to leave?
That would have been the responsibility of the administration to explain to the population what are the benefits and what are the damages, and put it into such terms that everybody would say, okay, now I'm informed, I can make an intelligent decision. But a lot of people were not properly informed of what was really taking place and the consequences of leaving the European Union. And they were just, as your colleague just mentioned, they were just looking at the immigration aspect of the situation, and they said, no, I don't want immigrants coming into England taking my job or taking our jobs. No, I better vote to leave the European Union. But
Yeah, I think that's one of the scary things. A lot of people end up voting on an emotional basis. They don't really understand what's happening. And I think, looking at the States, look at where Donald Trump has reached.
As a side hustle, I occasionally work with older people. And one of the comments that I've seen a lot on social media is the older population voted for the future of the younger population. And that's where the disconnect lay. As opposed to being aware of the consequences of leaving, they weren't completely aware or in tune with the advantages of staying. So they saw this immigration as a threat, and they're not comfortable with globalization, they're not on board. They're still living in that time when Britain was great and it had all these colonies. So when it comes to educating people and letting them know what they're choosing, can we really trust the administration to educate anybody well?
Well, that is a big question. What I can tell you, if you look at the example of Germany, Germany is going through the similar problems that Britain is going through. But Angela Merkel, Chancellor for Germany, what did she do? She understands the problem, and she understands that in order to keep the country where it is, when you have an aging population, you're going to have to allow immigrants to come in, because those are the ones who are going to be taking over the jobs, and those are the ones that are going to be productive, be generating the income, or call it the products that Germany trades with. So the reality is that maybe if politicians took a little bit more time and look at the wider picture, they would have trained the population and showed the population the benefits.
So we looked at people in the UK who may have voted emotionally, but obviously there's that party that, ran this whole campaign to leave. The people who are leading that party and the people who are educated and understand the implications of leaving, what's their motivation? Why are they doing this?
Quite frankly, most of the people who are educated and would have voted not to leave. I don't know if you recall, but the vote was very, very close.
In terms of the economic stakeholders, the
Yeah.
old money in Britain, are they the ones who pushed to leave because they saw that they would benefit more if they govern themselves?
Could be.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything that we can learn from the situation as Trinese?
As CARICOM.
Well, yes. There are a lot of things that we can learn. We're going to have to learn how to negotiate our trade agreements as a bloc
Right.
and individual islands.
Do we even have that much trading power? Because we don't really manufacture anything. We just have that oil and gas.
Well,
so are
you
we
see,
a step ahead?
people have this misconception that in order to trade, you need to manufacture goods in large quantities. No, that's not really the case. You can do a lot by just concentrating in boutique items. Or I'll give you an example, cassava beer.
Why have we never had cassava beer?
What is happening? We spoke about this in our soca episode. We did a episode with an Australian soca DJ, and we were talking about how Caribbean people don't realize the value of these boutique cultural forms. For example, we did not jump on that steel pan trade. We could have made a lot of money off the steel pan had we done it properly, and now it's just everywhere, and other countries are making money off of it. We are not taking advantage of our cultural products.
Or we're not really focusing because we are so blinded by the fact that we need to sell in large quantities in order to do something, that we are missing out on the bigger picture. No company in Trinidad and Tobago has the capacity to serve a country like Brazil. So why don't you just pick a city in Brazil and sell to a chain of supermarkets in that city?
Yeah, it seems as if we're not understanding the way globalization works.
Why haven't we done this yet?
Again, it comes back to having this oil, being intoxicated with oil and gas, and that oil and gas is going to do everything for us.
Yeah.
The diasporic population of West Indians in Europe, it's quite high. It may not seem like the biggest business in the world, but you could definitely export a lot of the local products into those countries and do very, very well because the markets are there. Whenever you see a wall coming up and you think that is a challenge, is really an opportunity.
That's true.
Amen.
Wise words. Ruben, thank you very much again for joining us and for enlightening us on this topic. We've learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners have learned something as well.
So I think the takeaway is don't freak out from Brexit.
yes, it may have been a little bit of panic in the markets on Friday, but panic is probably going to go away within the next couple of weeks. And not until there's a definitive policy as to how they're going to handle immigration, how trade agreements are going to be handled, all the different aspects that make up the exiting of the European Union are put down on the table. So for the time being,
Chill out.
Chill out.
yeah.
All right, that's a
All right,
wrap.
that's
Yay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.